Here's what's coming up in episode 190. Mitchell Coombes.
Oftentimes, signs from spirit are what I feel to be very subtle. They may be very subtle, but I can tell you this, they're always memorable. And when you receive a sign from spirit, there's no mistaking it. Because all of a sudden, that song in the garden, Elvis's voice burst out, but at chipmunk speed, really, really fast. And Susan sort of just thought, oh my goodness me, this is a sign from my mum. Well, the look on the minister's face, I think he was horrified, but Susan sort of chuckled to herself.
Speed it up. Come on, speed it up.
Well, that's it. And she always lamented and said, oh, this hymn, it's such a beautiful hymn. But the tempo is so slow. You can just imagine, in the garden in the morning dew, it came out so fast. Again, a sign from spirit. It's just that I've never been so lost for words. There's so many directions I could take this question, Patrick.
Welcome to the Big Seance Podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance.
Mitchell Coombes is known as Australia's most trusted spiritual medium, and his first book, Sensing Spirit, is a bestseller. He is also the author of Sensing Psychic, Signs from Spirit, Inspiring True Stories from the Afterlife, and the creator of the Psychic Soul Oracle cards, as well as his television appearances on Channel 7's The Morning Show. Mitchell writes a weekly advice column for Woman's Day magazine and is a regular guest on numerous radio shows, including Breakfast with Tanya Wilkes and Stephen G. on Newcastle's 102.9 Triple M. Born and raised in Newcastle, New South Wales, Mitchell comes from a long line of gifted psychics that stretches back more than 400 years. Throughout his childhood, Mitchell would regularly hear voices and see otherworldly faces of people who had passed away. Today, he is a highly sought-after and respected medium whose messages of love, hope, and healing have brought joy and comfort to countless numbers of people. To learn more about his work and schedule, visit Mitchell online at mitchellcoombes.com, and that's MITCHELLCOOMBES.com. Today, we're being visited by a fabulous guest who has been with us before, and that is Australia's most trusted spiritual medium himself, Mitchell Coombes. His previous appearance was in episode 115, which is way back in 2018, which honestly, at this point, seems like a lifetime ago, I think. In that episode, we focused on his book, Sensing Spirit. We learned that, Mitchell, you made your first prediction at the age of 3. You had an NDE at 13. We learned about your guide, Red Feather, and a guide named Buttons, which we didn't hear much about Buttons, but I think that is adorable because Buttons was a clown in life. And we also learned about the concept of calling your energy back. I don't know if you remember this, but that blew my mind when you just brought up calling your energy back. And I was like, whoa, stop. Okay, what? Because I thought that was so cool. So anyway, if you missed that episode and you haven't heard it, check that out. And an easy way to get there is just to go to bigseance.com/115 to listen, or in your podcast player, you can just zoom back to 115. But today we're talking about Mitchell's recent book, Signs from Spirit, Inspiring True Stories from the Afterlife. And I've got a lot of just general nerdy questions for him too, but that's the book that we're going to learn a lot about. I can't wait to hear about some of the signs. Welcome back to the parlor, Mitchell.
Oh, it's so lovely to be here. Thank you, Patrick, for having me on the show and on the podcast. And, God, the world has changed so much since we last spoke.
It has. Like, what have you been up to since we last heard from you in 2018?
Oh, well, I've been, prior to COVID hitting, of course, I was touring. I was doing live readings and events for audiences all over Australia and having a great time with that. And then, of course, as we all know, the world sort of completely stopped and now we're all working in a new way. But it's so wonderful that we can connect in this way.
Do your abilities change and grow? Like over the years, like would you have possibly noticed a difference in your abilities since 2018?
Well, 100%. I mean, I notice a difference in my abilities every single day. And I would say to you that as a spiritual medium, I'm constantly growing, changing, evolving, even discovering, you could say, new abilities or new ways to use my abilities that perhaps I hadn't been aware of before. I've been doing private appointments and private readings for the last, 18 years. Looking back to when I first begun to looking to, say, present day, yes, they're very different because, I work differently than I do now. Just little things that you don't realize, but because we're all constantly growing and evolving and changing, I would say that, yes, they do. They change and evolve over time, as they should.
Yeah. I mean, I think probably a lot of mediums have had to, even if they weren't working with technology before, if they were going to stay working in the last year or two, they probably had to figure it out. And so, and I know you were probably doing like readings over phone or things like that before, but how's that changed? How's that been?
Well, it's really nice that now that more people are willing and ready and able to come on to, say, a Zoom call or to, be on FaceTime or Skype or any of these other sort of platforms where we can see each other.
Yeah.
Back when I first started offering phone appointments, I can remember clients then, sort of saying, I would say to them, if you'd like, we could do like a web video call, using other softwares at that time. And people were terrified at the very thought of having a web camera or being on screen. But now everybody is so ready and willing, and we've all got that, most of us are pretty experienced in knowing how Zoom works or how to do a FaceTime call. And it's lovely to be able to see a person. But for me, I've always been the kind of medium that, works through connecting into a person's voice vibration. So what that means is when I hear a person's voice, regardless whether I can see them on the screen, just hearing a voice allows me to make a connection to their loved ones that are in the spirit world. So I always say to my clients, as I hear your voice and as you talk to me, your loved ones who have passed over into the spirit world will come and talk to me as well. So it all works on their voice. They pick up on hearing your voice and they come in. And that's how I'm able to do, readings and messages, say, on radio when I take live callers. It works very much in the same way. I listen to a person's voice and that helps me to connect into their energy.
So perhaps spirits have been using a form of Zoom for centuries.
I think that spirit loves technology. The spirit world loves technology. And I think the spirit world is excited that we are finally making these advances ourselves with technology. I always say, Patrick, if you think about it, we are energy, spirit is energy. And so it's not uncommon for a lamp or a light to flicker. And I feel that, now in this very modern technological age, even noticing things like your iPhone or your smartphone device, how quickly, it can change. Sometimes the screen may freeze on a particular image that you're scrolling through on, say, Facebook, or it may turn itself off, or it makes a weird noise, or Siri sort of activates for no reason at all. There's all these little nuances that I feel that happen that show us that spirit is there. And I have found that many of my clients and readers of my books have been sending me stories of their loved ones in spirit, connecting to them through devices like, I won't say the name, but the one that has a name that we always say. And then, of course, that home device, like you've got Amazon has a product. There's Google Home. I won't say her name or the name.
But she's a popular lady.
Very much so. It's like, I have a client of mine who has an Amazon Alexa. And the other day, she said that she went into her room and all of a sudden it was playing music. She didn't ask Alexa to play any music. She didn't ask for any music to be played. But Alexa, the speaker in her room, just decided that it would play music. And when my client stopped in her tracks and she really listened to the song on her Alexa was Angels by Robbie Williams. And she said that was the song that was played at my father's funeral. And then as quickly as she had acknowledged that, the music had sort of stopped. So there's no explanation for why Alexa was playing that song. More importantly, how it sort of came to be. But, our modern devices in our lives, be it our computers, our phones, they can give us signs if we're open to accepting them when they come.
And you even have just basic signs, because right before we started recording, you had a drawer apparently pop open right next to you. So
I did. We're sitting here, aren't we, doing our sound check, and I sort of look at you and say, Patrick, the drawer next to me at my table, it's just a little basic sort of table. There's two drawers. They're very like little drawers, and they're on like runners, and they've got like I don't know, when you close it, it stays held shut. They're on like those sort of, it just popped itself open all the way out. I'm doing it now, as you probably can hear. And I sort of looked at you, didn't I? And said, oh my goodness me, my drawer's just opened here on its own. So, and what's really remarkable about that is, first of all, I've never seen it ever do that before. My table is very level. We're on level ground here. And actually, if I'm really that honest with you, the amount of junk that I have in my drawer, from sticky tape holders to pencils to pens that don't work. And really, every time I normally open the drawer, I forcefully have to sort of yank the drawer open, because everything in there gets caught and gets jammed. It doesn't want to open. So the fact that it sort of just extended itself all the way out is unusual.
You need to pay attention to that this evening, because in our last visit, because I listened to our last episode today, I told you.
Yeah.
I had told you a story at the time. This was probably before I started podcasting. I was working on a blog post about spirit communication and like signs and like different techniques. And I had at the time a vintage cabinet with glass doors that I had a lot of my equipment and like geeky tools and things like that I kept all of that stuff in. And I was sitting there working on that blog post, and one of the doors just popped open, and I turned and looked at it and I went, huh. And then I turned right back to my computer screen and just kept on working on my blog post. And after that, I was like, you are so dumb. Like that was just like that was them welcoming me, because that was all of my spirit communication tools in there. That couldn't have been more obvious. But then I was like, huh, neat. And then just kept moving on. So you have to pay attention to that drawer.
Well, I will be paying attention. But see, for me, it's very natural, because really, when I think about it, my home, it's alive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, the amount of times that I've had to replace light globes for lamps and lights and things. And I live in a newer home with brand new electrical wiring. I'm the only occupant that's ever lived here. It's like, it shouldn't be happening. I've had the electrician out. There's nothing wrong. But, it's not uncommon for lights to blow, the TV to decide that it wants to turn itself off. Little things like that do happen around me at my home. And I guess because it's such a natural part of my life, at first, you are a little bit like, oh my goodness me, what is happening here? But for me, it really is, if I'm really honest, it's very much a natural part of my life where I'm so used to it. Sometimes it's like I want to casually sort of roll my eyes, turn my head the other way, and sort of keep, preparing dinner and sort of whatever. It's like, let that go, because it's sort of, the other day I was out to dinner with a friend of mine, with Susan, who I know listens to the podcast. And we came back home to her place after dinner. And as we were entering into her home, she was telling me about a little bit of a problem that she's having at the moment with her home, with the way that renovations were carried out at her property. And she was sort of saying, oh, I'm going to have to really sort this problem out. And then all of a sudden, there's a light that is in her hallway, and it sort of sparked, like it glowed for a split second and sort of stopped. And we looked at each other, and she said, did you just see that? I said, oh yeah, your dad's here again. So it's like, it's very natural, isn't it? But I want to just let everybody know that, signs from spirit, sometimes they do arrive in very dramatic ways. It's very dramatic. It's like the light blows, or there's something really dramatic that happens. But sometimes signs from spirit, and oftentimes signs from spirit, are what I feel to be very subtle. They may be very subtle, but I can tell you this, they're always memorable. And when you receive a sign from spirit, there's no mistaking it. If you're an open person, if you have an open mind, you'll be able to go, oh my goodness me, I know that that's my loved ones on the other side saying hello from heaven, or giving me a hug from heaven. And so noticing a sign from spirit, I always say, is very much like noticing a shooting star in the sky. At first, everything seemingly like everything is in place in the sky, but then seemingly out of nowhere, something catches your eye, your thoughts, your attention, or your senses. And so noticing signs from spirit is very much in this way. I find that they're very subtle most times, but they are always memorable.
And by the way, I just have to add this in here. Shout out to Susan. Susan is fabulous because, first of all, Susan is the reason for our connection, number one. And did you know this? Susan was my very first listener feedback. She's the first one who recorded her voice and sent it in. I didn't
know this.
Way back in like my first year. And ever since then, like does she not have the most beautiful voice, calming voice, lovely voice? And she still sends me messages. And of course, I replied to her lovely message with my hick, American voice when I send it back to her. But oh my gosh, she is beautiful. So shout out to Susan. We love you. Thank you.
Shout out to Susan. We do love you. And she's a very good friend of mine, Susan, one of my dearest friends and longest friends. I love her to bits. And we have had, Patrick, that many experiences together. I can remember that Susan and we went to the quarantine station in Manly in Sydney. And I can remember that we were with a tour group on, like a paranormal investigator tour. And we were so excited and eager to try out my new EMF meter. And we were so back in the day, this story is years old, but anyway, we raced ahead of the group and we got to a certain point of this quarantine station. And of course, with an EMF meter, generally there's like a green light that stays illuminated or lit up. And then as it detects changes in the electromagnetic field, it detects the energy, the lights start to flicker or they change and, they move up in color. So it's like green and then yellow and then orange and then red. It's kind of like, oh my God, it's red run. But anyway, so we got to this place and we turned on the EMF meter and we're just standing there silently. The group isn't too far behind the rest of us. We were able to sort of just venture off. And the lights on my EMF meter, Patrick, it's like, all of us were standing there and the light would sort of like the next light would light up and then it would jump from like, in succession. So it was like, the green lights on, then it would be like the yellow lights and then it go into the orange lights and then it go into the red lights and then it would go back down again. So it was almost like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1. It was like going up and down the lights like this. And it gave me the impression that there was a man in spirit that was pacing like up and down in front of us. And when the tour group finally caught up with us, he said to the group, oh, there's been sightings of a ghost, of a man. Apparently he paces and walks up and down this landing where we were standing. I looked at Susan and she looked at me and we smiled at each other. And I guess I was thrilled that my EMF meter was working.
You're like, yep, we caught him.
we got it, and we've had so many experiences. I could fill a whole book with all the stories that we've had of, different investigations that we've been on. There was Maitland Gaol that we went to and we both heard audibly, we heard a man heckling and laughing in our ears. And this was a jail that really, it was, it basically held some of Australia's most worsened, horrible criminals, some of them. It was just awful. So the energy that's there is a little bit heavy. But we've had so many experiences like that. So she's my Paranerd friend that we go on these expeditions with.
And you sent me, I remember you sent me video from a concert. Was it Shania Twain? Did you go to a Shania?
Oh, I love Shania Twain. Yes, we went to Shania.
Yeah, that's funny.
A little bit of Shanae, as I like to say. We love Shania.
My mom and my sister call it Shanana.
Shanana, I like that too. I don't know that she'd like that very much. She probably say that don't impress me much.
What? Your book, Signs from Spirit, in the table of contents, you have signs from departed loved ones, signs from above, you have dream signs and gifts and treasures. And I don't have a lot of notes in front of me because I'm just thinking there has to be so many stories that you could share. And the first thing I was curious about is I would like to know if there is a funny sign that you've received at some point. Like, what is the funniest sign that you have ever received for someone? And then if you want to just go into any signs,
First of all, let's just clarify that, that many of the common signs we hear about, seeing a raven or a small bird or finding a feather, a butterfly, a penny or a dime from heaven, hearing a song on the radio, smelling a familiar scent or fragrance that reminds you of a loved one who has passed over. So there are many ways, and I find the spirit world is ingenious in what they will use around them to really send us their love and to send us a sign. You talk about funny signs. What's a funny sign? I mean, there are so many signs that, I guess I have received myself over the years. But, you mentioned it in the setup of the interview about I have a spirit guide who I had affectionately dubbed the name Buttons because I'd always find these buttons. And it turns out Buttons used to be a clown. And I have to say, whenever I'm needing a bit of a pick-me-up or I'm feeling perhaps a little bit flat, or maybe I've had something upsetting or I've received upsetting news or something like that, it won't be long before I'll find a small button. And it's almost like Buttons the clown is trying to say, it's okay, look to the brighter side of life, turn that frown, upside down into
honk,
a smile.
And then the clown car comes in, you're
So, that's one fun sign that I've received. But I find that, when we do receive a sign from spirit, it's because in that moment of time, we really are needing that sense of comfort or perhaps reassurance. And so generally the signs that are sent to us come with that intention of, I'm here, I love you, I'm watching over you, don't worry, I'm supporting you, everything's going to be okay. It's, that reassurance to know that life goes on and that our loved ones are there with us. So I can tell you that one of my favorite signs, or one of my favorite stories that I write about in my book, Signs from Spirit, is called Sunflower Love. And basically, I'll share with you that every 2 years, there's a gentleman, his name is Daniel. He books a private reading with me. And wherever possible, the date of the reading is to mark the anniversary of his brother's passing. Well, 6 years ago, Daniel's older brother, his name was Pete, he was waiting for a bus when a drunk driver behind the wheel of a four-wheel drive lost control, skipped the curb, and smashed into the bus shelter. And Daniel's brother, Pete, he passed instantly at the scene of the accident. And well, during the first reading, Daniel really, he wanted to know, whether his brother had suffered any pain before he died. And of course, I was able to reassure him that his brother, Pete, it was instantaneous, his passing. He didn't feel anything. It was so quick. Just a lot of surprise and then adjusting to finding himself in the spirit world. Well, 2 years later, Daniel returned for another reading with me, and his brother Pete wasted no time at all in coming through with clear messages. And, there were thoughts and images that just kept filling my mind, and I was able to relay so much to him. But Daniel was really thrilled because Pete was, still very much a part of his life, and the messages I was giving him sort of helped to show that. But anyway, as the story goes, last year, Daniel's reading took a different turn, actually a different direction. Instead, his brother jumped in first with a question, and he said to him from Spirit World, well, actually, I said to my client, I said, your brother is showing me a sunflower, and he says that you added a touch of sunshine to a young woman's day. And Daniel's eyes really widened as if to say, you're kidding. I just love it, Patrick, when my clients say to me, oh my goodness me, how did you know that? It's like, well, call me psychic, that's what you're here for. But anyway, my client explained to me that earlier that morning, he was placing freshly cut flowers into buckets while dressing the display stands out the front of the florist shop that he worked at. So he's a florist, my client. And all of a sudden, he's explained to me that he just felt so compelled to look over to the coffee shop that was opposite the florist store that he was working at. And he said that seated at the window, there was a young girl with slumped shoulders, and she sat motionless, just staring at her coffee, not even really looking at her phone, like nothing was capturing her attention. And so when he sort of returned to organizing his, floral display, he'd noticed that a single bright yellow sunflower had found itself amongst all these red roses. And how it got there, he said, well, I have no idea. And then this crazy idea popped into his mind. Daniel, my client, he crossed the mall, apologized for the interruption, and handed the sad young lady a bright yellow sunflower. And she looked so shocked. I thought she would tell me to buzz off, is what he said to me. But actually, instead, the young woman stood up and hugged my client really tight, and she didn't let go for what felt like ages, he said to me. And what Daniel had learned was that the young woman's fiance was cycling to work a few months earlier when a driver typing a text message on their phone knocked him off his bike, taking his life. And on their first date, this young woman's fiance had brought her a sunflower not a rose, and said, "You are my little ray of sunshine." So the young woman really told Daniel that she'd woken that morning, just feeling so beside herself with grief. And she really asked her departed fiance to send her a sign to let her know that he was okay in heaven. And so the story really is a beautiful reminder that sometimes you may not realize it, but you may feel compelled to do a random act of kindness. And perhaps by inadvertently doing that, you are becoming a message for someone. You are helping spirit to share a message, to deliver a message. So of all the flowers in a florist shop for a sunflower to end up in the rose display, and he just had this idea, I'm going to take this sunflower over to this lady and say, "Hey, I don't know why I want to give this to you, but this is for you." And as it turns out, her fiance, who had sadly passed in a tragic accident, that was the very first flower he actually gave to his partner and said, "You're like a ray of sunshine in my life." I mean, it's stories like that where it may be a flower that a stranger gifts to us, or as I said to you, hearing a song on the radio, these can all be ways that the spirit world reach out to us.
Fabulous. Several of my family members and I have an agreement of how we're going to reach out to the other when we pass. But it makes me wonder, would you encourage everybody to just kind of, with your loved ones, agree on some kind of sign? How easy would that be for the world of mediumship if everybody just agreed on a sign and said sunflower or, Butterfinger or
Well, it's certainly been done before, but I think that, a lot of people, unfortunately, their loved ones have since passed and they don't have that opportunity to you, as you say, to agree on a specific sign. So what can be really helpful in the beginning of wanting to be open to receiving signs is to ask for a sign. So you could sort of say to your loved ones in spirit, "Okay, please send me, an orange or a butterfly or, a giraffe on the back of a truck." What you can make it obscure and as unusual or as bizarre as you like. But what you do is you ask for that and then be patient and be open to receiving the sign. Now, you might say, "Can you send me an orange?" But it may not be that an orange is placed into your hand. It might be that, one day, your child comes home from school and shows you a painting that they've drawn and they've decided they're going to draw an orange. So, sometimes signs don't always come in the very literal sense. They may come more abstract. They may come to us in a more symbolic way. But I feel that asking for a specific sign from your loved one can be a great way to begin to open the communication with them. But what I would really encourage, and this is just sort of what I've always felt and done, is I always say to my loved ones in spirit, "Please send me a sign that I can easily and that I will easily recognize." And then be really open. Because, sometimes we may be looking for, say, the orange or looking for that very specific sign we've asked for. And in doing so, we may have overlooked several other ways that spirit is trying to get our attention. And there was a lady, actually, and I write about this in my book, Signs from Spirit, where, she was sort of almost overlooking a sign. And so it took her 6-year-old son to really sort of show her, "No, Mum, this is really a message. This is really a sign coming through from spirit." And so not until Sandra, that's this lady's name, had arrived for her reading, later on, did the early morning sound of rain make sense. As soon as I opened the door, Sandra's 6-year-old boy, Will, bounced into the reading room. "Hi, Mitchell," he said, looking, holding up an old copper coin. "Look at what Poppy gave me." And I glanced at my client, Sandra, and she smiled back apologetically. And when I closed my eyes to begin the reading, I could see copper pennies raining down out of a glass jar. And holding the jar was Will's grandfather in spirit. And I said, "Did your Poppy give you a jar of pennies?" And Will grinned. "Yes, and it sounds like rain when I tip them out on the floor." Sandra settled herself into her chair, and Will, her son, he sat alongside her very quietly. Before Dad passed away, he asked me to give his penny jar collection to Will, but now I'm regretting the decision. Sandra leant forward and lowered her voice. "Will is making up stories about his Poppy giving us more pennies to add to the jar." Will glanced across at his mum, Sandra, furrowing his brow, and he said, "I'm not making up stories, Mummy." Sandra raised her index finger to her lips and sort of said to her son, "Be quiet, use your inside voice." And Will sort of slid off the chair and approached the reading table where I was sitting with Sandra. "Before Poppy got sick, he said angels tossed pennies down from heaven when they miss you. Now Poppy in heaven, he's tossing down pennies to me." And Sandra grimaced and sort of said, "See what I mean?" And I said to Will, "Can I hold your Pop's penny in my hand?" And, Will, he sort of grinned and he placed this little penny in the palm of my hand. And I closed my fingers around the coin, and to add a sort of a touch of theatre for Will, I sort of waved my other hand and sort of closed my eyes like a magician, And I could see that Will's eyes had sort of widened in anticipation. I said to him, your poppy is showing me your shoe. And quick as a flash, Will actually removed his left shoe and sock, and he sort of leant back on the seat and thrust his bare foot up at me. And he said, see, Poppy's penny gave me a blister. And Sandra sort of blushed. And anyway, it turns out that 2 days earlier, on a frantic school morning, Will was complaining to his mum that there was a round lump in his shoe. But, with lunches to prepare and school bags to pack, Sandra didn't have time for Will's games. So she sort of said to Will, come on, just get ready for school. But when she picked up her kids later that afternoon, she'd noticed that her son Will was actually limping. And so once home, Sandra and Will sort of sat him down on the laundry bench, and she removed his left shoe and inspected his left foot. And what she noticed was a big round blister had formed on his heel. And Sandra sort of, I guess you could say, shook Will's shoe, but nothing dropped out. And it was only when she traced across the shoe's lining with her thumb did she feel a round object under it. And Will's school shoes were brand new. She said that, they were fairly new, and she had to actually praise the back of the well-glued lining with a knife to sort of see what was causing that lump. And when Sandra peeled away the heel lining of the shoe, she couldn't believe her eyes, Patrick, because a 1955 Australian penny fell out, which was the actual year that her father, who had passed, was born. In 1955. And all the while, Sandra had sort of suspected that a 6-year-old basically had sort of tampered with his shoe and placed the penny there himself. I was able to confirm that the penny was an unmistakable gift from her departed grandfather. And my favorite part of that experience was when Will then chimed in and said, see, Mummy, it's a penny from Poppy, just like I said. And they added that to the jar. And so, sometimes, when we receive a sign from spirit, it can defy all logic. There's no rhyme or reason. It defies logic. How a 6-year-old would be able to pick out a penny with the year 1955 and understand and even know that that was the year that his grandfather was born, and then peel back the lining of his well-glued lining of the shoe and put it under it didn't happen. It's a sign from spirit. Spirit put that penny there. Her father put that penny there to remind Sandra, I love you. I'm with you. I'm watching over you. Oh, and by the way, here's another penny for Will. And so sometimes I always say to people, when we receive a sign, if you're a little bit skeptical, you're unsure, I always say, apply the 3-time rule. At first you think, that was nice, that could be something. If it happens a second time, it's sort of like, notice it, really notice it. Pay attention. And if it happens a third time, you sort of say, okay, this is definitely a sign from spirit. I accept it. And you have to accept it. So, I always say, if in doubt, apply the 3-time rule. But signs from spirit are around all of us in our everyday lives. And like I said, they often will appear and turn up when we least expect them to.
I think people should write them down too, because it's kind of like when you have a dream and you wake up and you don't write it down. Like if I have some kind of moment where I think it could have really been some kind of sign or symbol, just going, and then moving on, I think I probably forget those. And so keeping some kind of journal, like you would a dream journal, I bet would help.
It can really help. It can absolutely help. And even just if there are physical signs that you can collect, for instance, say you always find feathers, it's always lovely to collect those feathers up and keep them in like a little jar, or pennies from heaven, like what Will was doing. And, his pop sending him more pennies, or, I know some of the people call them dimes, pennies, currency, but small coins, and placing them in the jar and sort of saying, well, this is a sign from spirit. But, signs can even come through the form of music, through hearing songs. I remember when Susan once told me a story. Her mum was an accomplished pianist, loved playing old hymns on the piano and gathering the family around. And in fact, one of the old songs that she really loved was In the Garden. And she especially loved the gospel version by Elvis Presley. And she always lamented to Susan, it's too slow. It's, the tempo for such a beautiful hymn, it's so slow. It needs more of an upbeat tempo. And so anyway, when Susan's mother had actually passed over, I can recall Susan saying that they had picked out In the Garden to play at her mum's funeral. So it was all picked out and they were there. And when the minister that was conducting the service went to play that song, everyone at first was shocked because all of a sudden that song in the garden, Elvis's voice burst out, but at chipmunk speed, really, really fast. And Susan sort of just thought, oh my goodness me, this is a sign from my mum. And then it just, as quickly as it burst out into chipmunk speed, it sort of skipped and started playing at its normal tempo again. Well, the look on the minister's face, I think he was horrified, but Susan sort of chuckled to herself going, that's a validation from my beautiful mum to know that she's here and
speed it up. Come on, speed it up.
Well, that's it. And she always lamented and said, oh, this hymn, it's such a beautiful hymn. But the tempo is so slow. I wish the tempo was a bit more, upbeat. And so, you can just imagine, in the garden in the morning dew, it came out so fast, chipmunk speed. Again, a sign from spirit. It's not uncommon either for even our loved ones in spirit to come to us through familiar scent, through smell. I mean, I don't know how many times, listeners may have had this experience where, they've smelt a fragrance and think, oh my goodness me, that's the smell of tobacco. That's my dad. Or I can smell Old Spice, or I'm smelling the smell of gardenia. My mum loved gardenias, So it's kind of, spirit will reach out to us through signs. But I have to tell you, Patrick, what I have noticed that's been happening recently. Now that I've been able to resume doing some of my live events with audiences, and, sometimes there's, 500 people, 1,000 people, there's large audiences before me. What I feel in the room now when I'm giving a group reading is the energy. It becomes almost electric. And I have noticed, and this has happened a few times now, at different venues, at different theatres, in different auditoriums, the lights flicker. Halfway through, they just start to flicker, and quiet, very animated. They flicker quite dramatically. And I've often found that as I'm giving a message, I'll say to a client, I've got your mum here, and then the lights in the auditorium flicker. And I have had lighting engineers, sounding engineers that are working, that are handling that. They get very upset. They get very worried. And they spend the whole rest of the evening trying to figure out, how do we stop these lights from flickering? Why are they flickering? What is going on? And I have to explain to them, it's energy. And I've noticed that more and more I'm receiving physical manifestations through, be it the sound or the lighting at my live events. And it doesn't matter which equipment we use, which venue we're at, whether I'm in a different state, if I'm working, and there's always different technicians every event that I work. I don't have the same technician. But it's been happening now at multiple events and venues as the lights will just flicker. And of course, the whole audience, you can hear them all going, gasping collectively, going, what's going on? But what I have found so remarkable is those lights flicker as I'm saying certain pieces of information, as almost like that we know that there's an intelligence as it's happening. And it's remarkable to see all these years later and to experience why it has started, how it has started. I can't tell you. But what I can tell you is either my stage lights get interfered with, or the actual lights in the theatre and the auditorium, the audience lights, all of them will flicker almost on and off. It's so dramatic when it happens, but yet it's real. There's not a lighting technician up there saying, all right, let's push the dimming switch. And in fact, most of the time, the lights that are flickering are not dimmable. And that's when the crew say to me, well, they're either all off or they're all on. And I've even had it during the evenings where the technicians say, well, let's just switch the lights off then. We'll just keep them off. And I say, no, leave them on, let them flicker, because I like to see, the representation of that energy. I love
the validation. Yeah.
Well, I love it. I think it's fabulous, and that's the thing, sensing the spirit world is much like the wind. We don't see the wind. We can't see the wind. Well, most of us, we don't see the wind, but we see the effects of what the wind touches. We see the leaves rustling in the trees or the blades of grass blowing. Well, very similarly with the spirit world, for most people, they may not see the spirit world in the same way that I do or that other mediums do, but we may feel the spirit world, or we see the effects of when the spirit world is influencing or brushing past something. Maybe the lights will flicker. Maybe there's a smell. Maybe like that client of mine, that her Alexa that decided to play a song all of a sudden. We see the effects of when the spirit world touches our lives. And I believe that the spirit world enters the lives of everybody, not just a gifted few. We can all learn to receive signs from our loved ones. We can all learn to connect with our loved ones. And that's in my book, Signs from Spirit. There's actually a guided meditation that comes with the book that you can do to learn to receive your own sign. And then there's a dictionary of symbols where we go through 100 of the most frequent or common symbols, including numbers, number sequences, butterflies, feathers, rainbows, anything you can think of. And there's a little interpretation of what the message from that sign could perhaps be for you.
This brought up a story in my mind that I'm remembering now. My maternal great-grandmother, when I was in college, when she passed away, I was given this dorky little, I had given my great-grandmother this little electronic poinsettia plant that when you push a button, it played Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree.
How fun.
And the flowers danced and everything. And I had given that to her a few years before she passed away. When she passed away, they gave that to me. So I remember I had it in my hutch where I had like some dishes and things like that. And it couldn't have been a week or more from the time she passed where that Rocking Around the Christmas Tree and the flowers started turning in that hutch. And so I was rocking out and I looked at it. And of course, in those days, this was before I was like a paranerd. I wasn't like super into this stuff. I thought it was cool, but of course I wrote it off and I had every reason why it wasn't a sign. But now I think back and I'm like, oh, please, that was a sign.
And I always say, and without a doubt, that was a sign. Like there's no question in my mind that is a sign from spirit. And, sometimes we ask for a sign, don't we? We say, please send me a sign. But then we receive the signs and we sort of write them off. We say, oh, that's not a sign or that's just a coincidence. But let me tell you, in my belief anyway, there's no such thing as a coincidence. I really do believe there's always a divine plan in place. It's not a coincidence at all. It's a sign from spirit. But I always say to people, put yourself in your loved one's shoes. Just imagine for a moment that it's you that happens to be in the spirit world. And we need to find a new way to communicate because now you're finding yourself in, more in your energetic form in spirit on the other side. So you think to yourself, I know I'm going to, make the lights flicker. But all that achieves is, your loved one, going out to the electrician and saying, come check my wiring. Something's not right with my lights.
It must be frustrating as hell.
So then you think to yourself, I'm going to sort of send you a feather. All right. So you send a feather to your loved one and they pick it up and go, oh God, there must be a bird that's just flown over that's lost that feather there. There's lots of birds here. So you think, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to come through to my loved one and I'm going to come to them in a dream. That way they'll know it's me. But then your loved one, unfortunately, wakes the next morning and passes it off as, well, it was just a dream. And so you can see how frustrating it must be for those in the spirit world. And so I always say, are you home for the spirit world? Are you ready? Are you awake? Are you home? And it's a bit like, with Alzheimer's patients or people that perhaps, have dementia. They say, oh, they're not at home today. They're not there. It's like the lights are on, but nobody's home. They're not there today. Well, it's like, sometimes I wonder if we're like that, if our light's on, but nobody's home and we sort of just completely glaze over and don't acknowledge and notice the signs when they are coming to us. And so I always say it's good to be home and it's good to be home for the spirit world and to say thank you. And I think that when we acknowledge a sign that we've received from a loved one, it opens the door, it paves the way for them to bring more signs to us. And I guess for me, that's why it's great to ask for a specific sign. And that's one way that you can do it. I've seen it work very successfully. And as I mentioned, it's one thing that you could try. But for me personally, I always say, please just send me a sign that I'll easily recognize. And then I'm open with all of my senses for whichever sign may be, presented to me.
So Mitchell agreed to allow some of his followers and my listeners submit some questions in audio form. They submitted them to me, and I am going to play Ashley's short question.
Hi, my name's Ashley. I lost my little boy at 35 weeks 4 years ago, and I'm just feeling a bit low at the moment. Would love some guidance from you in regards to him. Missing him very much at the moment. And my 2-year-old was born a year and a half after I lost him, and I just see so much of him in her. Would love to know if you have any words from him. Thanks heaps.
Well, thank you so much, Ashley, for your question. And first of all, I just want to say how sorry I am, to hear that you've lost your baby. Patrick, I've often said that I feel that to lose a child, it must be one of the worst pains to bear is to lose a child. I mean, all grief is awful, but to lose a young child, it almost seems illogical, doesn't it? And I can tell you, Ashley, that the soul of your baby boy, he will always be with you. He will always be around you. And I feel that he has continued and will continue to grow and to evolve in the spirit world. And it's interesting that you say that you see so much of him in your daughter, because I really feel that your daughter will sense him, will be aware of him. Now, whether when she was a baby, her eyes perhaps used to dart around the room or look over your shoulder. And I would say to you that your daughter was sensing and feeling her brother in spirit around her. My sense and feeling is he will always be, you are a mum to him and to your daughter. He will always be there and he will always be around you. And I want you to know that for all of us, when it is our time to pass, into the spirit world, you will hold him in your arms again. But my sense and my feeling is, and this is very interesting, Ashley, is I feel that you really need to look out for stars in the sky. And I don't know if you've actually thought of naming a star in the sky after your son, the baby that you've lost, if you've thought of naming a star in the sky, or if you've noticed a shooting star in the sky, but I just keep being told stars in the sky. And there's a beautiful lady in the spirit world that's holding him in her arms, and she belongs to your mother's side of the family. And I feel very much so that she's looking after him. So you don't need to be worried in that way, but to know that he'll always be around you and he'll always be there. And I feel your daughter senses him. Thank you so much for your question. I really hope that helps you.
Thank you, Ashley. And that, gosh, I'm so sorry. When I listened to it the other day, it broke my heart just listening to it. The next question we have is from Katie.
Hi, Mitchell. In the last couple of months, I've suffered 2 miscarriages. I'm quite a spiritual person myself. I've always believed that everything happens for a reason, and I sort of try to find the reasoning around things in life and different reasons why things happen at different times. I suppose with the miscarriages, it's one thing that I sort of haven't been able to work out for myself. And I was wondering if you might have not some sort of answers, but what are the sort of spiritual beliefs around miscarriage and losing a baby?
Well, Katie, I'm so sorry to hear, that you've had 2 miscarriages. And I just want to stop and say to you, Patrick, as you can see here, isn't it interesting that there's a theme that is building here? Mm-hmm. We've had another question, again, concerning the loss of a baby or the loss of a child. And what I can tell you, Katie, is in my experience, when a baby or a child passes, I believe that an angel is born. And I have seen nurseries in the spirit world where the souls of children or babies that don't make a full transition here to the earth, where they're cared for, where they're looked after, where they're given a lot of love and TLC. There's beautiful nurseries in the spirit world. And what I can tell you is that we sometimes can feel ready to have a child or to want to bring a child into this world. And I also believe that the soul of that child on the other side has to also feel ready to want to come into life in the physical sense. And sometimes we're ready, and for some reason, and for one reason or another, perhaps they're not. Sometimes it's that a soul will, because I believe that children choose us as parents. I really do feel that we choose our parents. And I believe that children choose their parents. And I believe that the soul of these babies that you've miscarried have chosen you as the perfect mother. And for whatever reason, they haven't had to go all the way through the birth process. So it's part of their soul's learning as well, just as much as it's a part of yours. But I think how beautiful and how special that they've chosen you as their mum, and knowing how difficult this experience would be for you to go through, knowing how awful and upsetting it must be to miscarry the souls of these children, but they've chosen you. And so really, you're a mum to those 2 children in the spirit world as well. And I believe they will always be your spirit children and connected to you. I really do feel that, it's interesting, as you say, I feel you are a very spiritual lady, and you are always, of course, looking for the spiritual reason or the understanding as to, well, why is this happening to me? I feel that sometimes, There is a reason, of course, for everything, but quite often we don't recognize or we can't see the reason until we look back on it in time. And I do hope that in time, you'll find the answers to your reasons why. But one thing I can say to you, it's not because, you're not meant to have children. It's not because you would be not a great parent. It's none of those things. So you must never, ever feel as though that it's happened to you or that you've been punished in some way. And I know that you haven't said that you feel that way, but I'd want you to know not to feel that way. There is always a reason. And what's really interesting is there is a lady in the spirit world, and I keep wanting to say to you, to me, she's holding a baby in her arms. And I really feel that there is still the possibility or the potential that you may go down the path of having another child or trying for another child. So I have to say to you, whilst you may not feel there's any hope because of what's happened, Spirit is giving me a very strong feeling that there is still hope that is there. And I hope that helps you. And I'm sending you lots of love and healing as well. I really hope that helps you, Katie. Thanks so much for your question, Kate.
Thank you, Katie. All right. So our last question is from Tammy.
Hi, Mitchell. It's Tammy. Yeah, I know my Peter's not coming back, but I always wish every day that he would. I just want to hear from him again, I guess. I really miss Pete and I just want him home, but I'm doing it pretty tough without him, and I just love him and miss him so much. And if you could let him know that I really do, I really like that. And I bought your book too, but I haven't read it because he's not in it. All right, thanks, Mitchell. Take care. Have a good day. Bye, love.
That broke my heart when she said, I haven't read it because he's not in it.
Yeah. Yes. And the thing is, Tammy, is that when we look at the stories in my books, it may not be your loved one we're talking about specifically, but they represent all of our loved ones. I believe that when the spirit world gives us a sign or sends us a sign, or when the spirit world comes through and gives a message, they speak for everybody who has lost a loved one, because they help to show us that, that love really does live forever, that there is life after death, and that our loved ones are very much a part of our lives. And Tammy, what I'm feeling from you is I feel that you are a very sensitive lady, and I can tell that you also a very spiritual lady, but you have what I like to call the cling film effect happening around you at the moment. And when you have the cling film effect, it's almost as though it's like we're being wrapped in cling film, or in glad wrap cling film, and we feel as though we are not able to receive messages from our loved ones because our grief, our sadness, when we are grieving, when we miss someone so desperately, and when we're in that pain of grief, and the throes of grief are just awful. It can be so debilitating, grief, can't it? But when we're in that grief, it's like we have a cling film around us. And so our loved ones may try to send us signs, but we find it hard to receive them, recognize them, be open to them, because they can't get through the cling film. All I can say to you, Tammy, is to give yourself time. And time it can help with healing. It will never, ever bring somebody back. And mediumship, of course, is not about bringing anybody back either, but it's about showing you, isn't it, that our loved ones are there and that they are around us and that the soul is eternal. And I really feel that as you work through, giving yourself time, being gentle with yourself, being kind to yourself, that cling film will start to peel away. And as it peels away, you will start to feel your Pete. You will start to feel his presence. You will start to become aware of him around you. Because as you're asking me this question, and as I'm hearing your voice, I can feel a tap on my shoulder. And I feel it's this man, and I feel he's trying to let you know that he really is there, and that he does love you. And I'm being told that you need to pay attention to your dreams. It will happen when you least expect, through the form of a dream, that you'll have a dream of him. And you must not pass it off as just a dream. It's actually a visit, where I feel he's visiting you from spirit. But our grief can really put that cling film effect around us, and it can really hamper our ability sometimes to be able to notice when spirit is there. So please, Tammy, I ask you, don't give up, and please know that you are loved more than words can describe. And I really do feel that in time, you will be able to make your own connections. You really will. Give yourself time. But in the meantime, trust and know that he is there. And when you said, can you please just tell him that I love him and that I miss him? I don't need to tell him that, because you just did, Tammy. As we played your message and as you recorded that message to send into this podcast, he was right beside you hearing that. So you can talk to him every day and he will hear you. Whether you hear him back, it doesn't matter. Trust that he can hear you, because believe you me, he does.
Thank you, Tammy. And I just know that I am sending you love from here in Missouri in the US. And I am quite sure that there are, for all of you ladies, Ashley, Katie, and Tammy, I'm sure lots of listeners right now are sending you their love. And I thank you for being brave enough. Not everyone is brave enough to send in their voice and their energy in a recording. And so I appreciate you allowing us to allow Mitchell to give you a little bit of his gift. And so I appreciate you offering to do that for us, Mitchell.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. And, and I really do. It's wonderful when you hear a voice, because, a voice to me is like a thumbprint. It's so unique. No two voices are quite the same. And voice carries a vibration, carries an energy. And our loved ones can pick up on our voice. They pick up on our energy. And so you only have to think of a loved one with love, and they will be by your side. I always say a thought is a prayer. Think of a loved one with love, whether you speak it out loud with your voice or you perhaps speak it in your mind. Think of a loved one with love in your heart, and they will be by your side always.
Excellent. Well, Mitchell, I have one more question for you. And then you are going to be able to do some shameless self-promotion, which everybody has the opportunity to do at the end of every episode. But this is one of my favorite questions that I've been asking lately. You know how we laughed and talked before we started recording about how I've kind of dropped the whole "what do you want to drink" thing, because
Yes.
that sometimes went well, and then sometimes it was like nobody cared about it. But I have been asking, what is your most treasured possession?
Oh, well, oh, goodness me.
You might need to think about that. If you need to think about it, you can.
No, I don't. But it's just that I've never been so lost for words. There's so many directions I could take this question, Patrick, because you see, one of my most treasured possessions is I have a really, really old crystal ball, which is called a Two Worlds crystal ball. And it goes right back to the 1800s when it was sold and created. And so it's hundreds of years old. It's very tiny. It's this little tiny crystal ball. I'll see if I can find it for you.
Oh my gosh. It's show and tell.
So this little box here.
Oh, that's a beautiful box.
Yeah. When you open it up, it's probably hard for you to see on the camera. It comes here in this beautiful box, as you can see.
Wow.
The box here. And it says here, 18 Corporation Street, Manchester, from a company called Two Worlds. And so this ball is from around about 1895. So it's at least 100 years old. It's only tiny, but the visions that I have seen in this crystal ball are very interesting. I love psychometry. I love being able to hold an object and be able to read the energy of the item and the story that it tells. And so, being that this crystal sphere, this crystal ball is so many years old, it has many stories that it can tell. But that will have to be for another time.
My mind just goes back to the Wizard of Oz. And as you were holding that up, and I know that I'm the only one that can see this, but you have a Himalayan salt lamp back there, and the reflection from that lamp in the crystal ball is amazing right now. That is so cool. I'm jealous.
It's really interesting. I've placed this into very dark candlelit rooms, and just watching the ball, the cloudiness of the ball change, the clarity of it change. Sometimes it appears to be more murky than others. Other days it's very clear. It's as though there's formations in the ball. It's really interesting. But yeah, I love it because it's just, it's so old. And then I also have a pair of aura goggles. So they're also vintage, and they're like steampunk. And so back in the day, you used to be able to you'd put them on to train yourself, because it'd block out certain light. So it would enhance ultraviolet light, I think, or it blocked it out. So it allowed you to be able to try to train your eyes to physically see auras. And so I've probably got a
stop it. Here. He's going to get those too.
So there's these aura goggles here. And basically, you look at them, right? And it's hard to see these look black, but they're actually like a violet blue, like a violet.
I have never heard of this.
Yeah, you'd put these on, and basically you would then be able to see violet light. And it's as though it would help you to train to like look around people and to actually see their energies. These are from the Metaphysical Research Group in England from 1968. So we're going back into the 60s now. And they're called Aura Goggles. So I've got these really fun, don't I? These really fun sort of possessions. And then I also have a beautiful fortune-telling teacup as well from Paragon, which have different symbols inside. And they'd be quite old too, the like Destiny teacups. So I have lots of Gypsy Witch fortune-telling cards, the Nile. I've got them somewhere. Where are they? Here they are. Yeah, these old sort of cards. They're very, very old. They're called the Nile fortune card telling cards.
Oh, they're beautiful. And again, these boxes are beautiful too.
Yeah, they kind of got, let's pull a card for you and we'll see what it says then, shall we?
Oh boy, who knows?
These are copyright 1897. So these are from the
same
19th
time
century.
period. Yeah.
Let's draw a card for you, Patrick.
This is exciting.
Well, let's see what it says. Okay. Well, I don't like that card. Put it. No, it says here. It says a dark widow or spiteful woman. But let's get some more, shall we? Oh, this is nice. Look, the 5 of Diamonds. Good luck, health, wealth, and happiness. Success in love affairs, and success in business ventures.
Ooh.
There you go. Very nice. Yeah, so they're a bit of fun. I think these are all beautiful things that I've collected over the years, and I really believe that these items, of course, each treasure has a story to tell and that they've all found a way to me. And I think it's no accident or mistake that, this crystal ball that's over 100 years old and these cards have found their way into my possession to me. But I must admit that for me, and not to sound all philosophical, but I really do think that because we come into this world with nothing and we pretty much will leave with only our experiences. And so perhaps for me, my most treasured possession, which I don't own either, are my experiences. And that's what whenever I feel a little bit down or a little bit sad or I'm needing a pick me up, I just reach into my bag of treasures which are my memories, and I will just pull something out that happened a very, very long time ago.
And whether it's from a long time ago or more recently, you could check out Signs from Spirit, Mitchell's book, to, dig into some of those treasured memories of your work and experiences. How's that for a transition?
I love it. Well, and my books are available on Amazon. So, you can easily get my books on Amazon or just go to my website, which is mitchellcoombes.com. That's COOMBES.com. mitchellcoombes.com.
Yeah, and I'll link to the book and Mitchell's site in the show notes. Do you have anything else coming up?
Well, I want to say to you, Patrick, we have decided, haven't we? We are thinking of doing something very exciting at the Big Seance. So watch this space.
Yes, we are thinking, I'll just give you a little hint. Mitchell is interested in doing some kind of live participatory thing. It would probably, I'd probably put it out on Facebook and YouTube and all the places where we'll invite some guests and have sort of a little seance. And he asked me this like I was going to, maybe turn him down, as if I would turn somebody down, on the chance to have a seance. So look for this. We still obviously have some planning, but how exciting is that? So I'm excited.
I'm super excited. I love nothing more than sharing messages from the spirit world. And so this is an opportunity for all of us to come together and to connect to the other side.
And maybe we'll bust the crystal ball out for that.
Well, we could, couldn't we?
We could.
We could. We absolutely could.
You rock, Mitchell Coombes. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun, and I can't wait to do it all again very soon.
Before I thank my Patreon supporters, I just want to say that a week or so ago, I had our first Zoom Paranerd Party, with several of my Patreon supporters, like Susan, Kevin, Ann and Renata showed up, Bruce, Melissa, and Jeanette. We had lots of laughs and it was so much fun. And I've decided to try to make it a monthly thing. So basically an extra bonus for my Patreon supporters. We've got something special planned for the next one. So, thank you to the following Super Paranerds who support this show at patreon.com/Big Seance. Daryl, James Deacon, Genesis, Natalie, Kim Robb, Jim Budd, Josiel Lorenzo, Susan Davey, and Amy Park Gedicke. My supporters at the parlor guest level, who can be found at bigseance.com/parlor guests, are Linda of shimmeringmoons.com, Anne Rekovich of ozparatech.com, Denise Sia of Raven Haunts Paranormal, Mitchell Coombes, Rochelle Fops, Christine Ferens, Mindy Kentop, Hope Battaglia, Cassie Keller, Melissa Armour, Diane Rax, Nettie, Dina DeCastro of Dina DeCastro Astrology, Peggy Hagen, Bruce Williams, Christopher Kohler, Lana and John of Carbon Lilies, David Rubenstein, and Norman and Linda Keller. That sound you just heard was the above and beyond, there's not even a category for your level of support fireworks display. Because I have 5 awesome listeners who support the show at the $10 level. Glenna Becker, Steve Skinner, Kevin Gilbert, AJ Meredith, and James Wilfong. So thank you, Glenna, Steve, Kevin, AJ, and James. And thank you, Paranerds. For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com. And you can continue the discussion and hang out with a great community of Paranerds by joining us in the Big Seance Parlor on Facebook. Want to hear your voice in a future episode? Go to bigseance.com/feedback to learn how. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.